I signed the peace agreement on November 10th, 1918, 3 days after the war ended, and no one remembers me doing it. The hall of mirrors was empty, except for candlelight trembling over inkwells, and my own breath fogging the glass. I placed my pen down, like a man burying a secret. No witnesses, no ceremony, just silence and the weight of a world pretending to heal. His brass-buttoned overcoat hung loose as he rose, the leather briefcase in hand, its cracked corner catching the last of the candle glow. He didn't look back at the treaty, only at the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one reserved for the American delegation that had left hours before. The mirrors reflected nothing but shadows and his own hollow eyes. Back in his study, lamplight pooled over the ledger like spilled wine. His pen had crossed out 5 names, military commanders who died before the Armistice, but beneath them, inked in red, were 5 French cities marked for total bombardment: Metz, Strasbourg, Lille, Dunkirk, and Verdun. He stared at them as if they were graves he'd dug himself. He lifted his pen again, not to sign, but to erase. A slow, deliberate stroke across one city name, Dunkirk, until the red bled into pulp. He didn't know then that someone had already seen it, that this map was not meant for his eyes, and that erasing it would make him the only man who could stop what came next. The next morning, he walked into the foreign ministry expecting applause, or at least acknowledgement. Instead, silence. His desk was cleared. His name struck from the guest ledger. A secretary handed him a single sheet. No treaty signed by you exists in official records. He opened his briefcase, its contents untouched, but the document he'd signed gone. He found Clemenceau in his office, cigar smoke curling like a ghost between them. You imagine things, Renard, the Prime Minister said, voice flat as a tombstone. The treaty was signed by 6 nations, not one lone clerk with ink on his fingers. But when Renard reached for his briefcase, Clemenceau's eyes flickered, just once, to the window where 2 men in gray suits stood watching. Renard returned to the archive vault that night, the key stolen from a guard's pocket. He ran his fingers along steel shelves stacked with identical treaties, each bearing 6 signatures. But where his name should have been, a clean space, no smudge, no tear, just blank parchment, as if he'd never existed long enough to sign anything. He pulled out his own copy, the one he'd signed in secret, and laid it beside the archive's version. The ink matched, the parchment matched, but his signature vanished, not smudged, not torn, erased with surgical precision, as if someone had reached into history and plucked him out before anyone could notice. He found his train ticket stub in his coat pocket, a remnant from November 10th, printed in typewriter font, acute. Renard, Versailles to Paris. No one else had that stub. No records showed him boarding, but the date matched, and as he held it up to the vault's flickering bulb, the paper felt colder than it should, like it was already part of a past that refused to remember him. The map on his wall, still marked with red circles, had changed. One city was now crossed out in pencil, Strasbourg. He didn't remember doing it, but the pencil's tip, Versailles, and beside it, a single line written in ink he'd never used before, they know you know. The room grew still. Even the dust motes stopped moving. He opened his briefcase for the first time since signing. Inside, beneath folded documents, lay a single sheet of parchment with no title. Only 3 lines. You signed peace to bury war. The world must not know what was planned. Your silence is your only legacy. No signature, no stamp, just ink, and the scent of lavender, his late wife's perfume. He walked back to the Hall of Mirrors at midnight. No guards, no candles, just his reflection in 100 mirrors, each one showing him standing alone. Then he saw it. The empty chair was no longer empty. Seated there in perfect stillness was another version of himself, the same coat, the same glasses, but smiling faintly, lips unmoving, eyes not blinking. He reached out, and his own reflection did not move with him. He took the train to Gare du Nord at dawn, ticket in hand, coat buttoned tight. No one looked up as he passed. The platform was alive with soldiers laughing, children waving flags, a world celebrating peace. But his ticket bore no destination, just his name, and beneath it, faintly stamped, arrival, oblivion. He didn't board any train. He just stood there, watching the steam swallow the tracks. In the archive vault, he ran his fingers along row after row of identical treaties, each signed by every delegate but him. Then he found it, the draft version, half-burned, still warm from a fire that never made the papers. The ink was smudged where his name should have been, and beneath it, in red pencil, 5 cities circled like targets. One of them, Metz, was already under Allied artillery fire. He returned to his study that night and found the ledger open, not to today's entries, but to 1914. The crossed-out names were not diplomats. They were French generals who had died in battle or disappeared after questioning the war's prolongation. His own name was listed first, and beside it, he saw the plan. He must vanish before he speaks. He wore his overcoat to the empty chair in the Hall of Mirrors, not to sit, but to stand beside it. The mirrors showed him perfectly, except one reflection. That one was holding a fountain pen, his own pen, and dipping it into an inkwell that didn't exist. When he reached for it, the pen vanished, and the reflection smiled again. Not in triumph, in sorrow. He dug through the coat's inner pocket, where he'd kept his wife's handkerchief, and pulled out not lace, but a thin sheet of vellum. Written in her handwriting, "If you're reading this, they've already taken your name. Don't fight it. The world isn't ready for truth. Only peace." The ink was old. She had died before the war began. He went to Clemenceau's private study, unannounced, and found the Prime Minister burning papers. Not war plans, letters, dozens of them, from wives, mothers, priests, all begging for an end to the siege. One letter was addressed to Renard. "You told us there'd be no more shelling in Lille. But the shells still fall. Why did you lie?" Clemenceau didn't look up. He just kept burning. The next morning, his apartment was empty. The map on the wall still showed 5 circled cities, but now all 5 were marked with black X's. His briefcase was gone. So was the parchment. Only the overcoat remained, hanging neatly by the door. And inside the pocket, a single key, cold to the touch, engraved with Archive Vault Section 7. Section 7 wasn't shelves of treaties. It was a sealed glass case holding only 3 objects: his spectacles, the train ticket stub, and a single dried lavender sprig. Beneath it, engraved in marble, he signed to save us from ourselves. No name, no date, just silence. The lights flickered, and for the first time since November 10th, he heard himself breathe. He took off his glasses. The world blurred, but so did the mirrors lining the walls. When he looked again, every reflection was him, but each one younger. One in uniform, holding a rifle. One kneeling beside a coffin. One signing with blood instead of ink. And at the end, the last mirror showed no face at all. Just an empty coat on a chair. He walked back to the vault one final time. The glass case was open. Inside lay a new document, rolled tight, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. It bore no title, no signature, only an address, the world that forgot. He unrolled it slowly and saw his own handwriting. Every word he'd ever written in anger, grief, hope. All erased, except one line: "I did what I had to do." The next morning, no one remembered him. Not at the ministry, not in the newspapers, not even the janitor who swept his study, where nothing had been touched since he left. The map was gone. The ledger too. Only the overcoat remained, hanging on a hook near the window, untouched by dust, as if still waiting for someone to wear it again. At Gare du Nord, a new ticket stub lay on the platform. Typewritten, acute. Renard, destination, none. Time of departure, always. No one picked it up. A soldier stepped over it without looking. The wind caught the edge, lifting it just enough to show the underside, where a single red ink circle had been drawn, small and deliberate. Strasbourg.